I started doing live video about 9 years ago.
Well, I got started in public access television.
I've been showing video in clubs since probably like 84, 85, something like that.
I had been a film student.
I'm originally a sculptor, ended up doing robotics and more installation work, and sort of got into video as part of the robotics.
I got started in college.
I signed up for a public access television show in New York City.
I feel liberated to be able to be a VJ.
I don't know if I could say I'm not a VJ in terms of who's defining what a VJ is. And I started actually, Benton had called me up, and I met him because he moved into my apartment in San Francisco when I was moving to New York, and he was doing some gigs out here with the 77 Hertz. And he told me he was doing live video. I had no idea what this was, but it sounded fascinating. Basically, he described it as a visual form of music.
My first professional VJ gig was, I guess, around 1989 or something like that. And it wasn't really an auspicious start for a VJ career. It was pretty much a scene that I didn't want to get too involved in. This was in Brooklyn at this heavily organized crime-controlled club. You know, like at the opening there was like people with sacks of money and guns and the whole 9 yards.
I started kind of just by collecting a lot of cine equipment, you know, which at the time was all getting flogged for nothing in car boot sales because everyone had got their kind of camcorder and wanted to start filming their home videos on video rather than cine.
We would get together, we would get all the gear that we could from the RPI equipment room and sort of put it all together with our laptops that were running VDMX2 at the time, and we would just, you know, throw visuals up on the screen.
VJing has been around for a while. There are a couple of notables here. There's a team of people called Feedbuck Galore, Buck and Missy Galore, who were doing this stuff a decade ago in Tunnel and in Sound Factory and a couple of the old clubs. And what they basically did is they had a lot of decks, a lot of half-inch and U-matic decks, and a lot of cameras and mixing equipment, refugees from the broadcast world. And they were showing a lot of different video that way.
I'm Missy Galore. This is Feedback. We're the Rogers and Hammerstein of video. Feedback Galore. Super Twin powers activate.
I started out filming avant-garde bands. When I first moved to New York, I filmed just about every avant-garde band that played at like the Knitting Factory and Roulette, just because I found out that if you had a camera and showed up during sound check, you could probably get in for free, and I had absolutely no money, but I did have a camera. Video was so expensive, the projector was huge, it weighed 200 pounds, it wasn't as bright as a slide projector, so a lot of the video was one square of video surrounded by 30 slide projectors and strobe lights, and whatever way we could make, you know, rope lights, any way we could make some kind of light in a dark space for cheap was what we did. And you know, there'd be one little video image because that was all we could muster. So I just started making feedback with the television screen, and somebody came here and offered to pay me 2 NEC monitors if I would come and do the video for their rock band. Missy came to my first show, which was at a little club called Skep on Broome Street. Exactly. And we got talking, and we watched each other's videos, and our style was really compatible, and we started working together like a week later.
The guys who were, I would say, probably the genesis of the real computer digital VJ abstract scene were Jeremy Bernstein and Kurt Rolski.
I was a VJ for about 15 minutes, and then I decided, you know what, this is not happening. No, I was a VJ for probably 2 years, and then at some point I realized that I didn't want to be a VJ, I wanted to be a video artist, and now I'm a video artist.
He's been around forever too. You should actually make a note about it. His name is Adam Chow, Chao. His performance name is Madame Chow. And if you've ever seen any absolutely crazy insane, every frame is different, accompanied by insane, horrible noise, video pieces that use a lot of martial arts clips and Simpsons clips and just everything but the kitchen sink thrown in, you're probably looking at his stuff.
Actually, the first show consisted of a single loop of something I taped off of television. It was a go-kart race on ESPN, and it was being presented as a very serious thing, although it looked ridiculous. And there was one cart and lead, and it said on the side of it in white little letters, it said 23 Coyote, and he was wing. And they just go going around and around in a circle, so I looped that. Just one loop or something like that. And I believe I used the word slave repeated over and over again. It was just the audio loop and the video loop. And that went around for about a half an hour. And that was the show. I was immediately canceled. I actually have the letter after the first show because my show consisted of 100% content not produced by me. And that was a violation.
There's this whole VJ thing, which is very much a contemporary kind of phenomenon. But if you start tracing where the roots of that go, it goes so deep, you know, that it really is, yeah, there is this sort of surface of everything that's going on now, which is very digital, it's very like online, it's this whole kind of very fast-moving community. But if you start looking at the history of that and what it is and what it means, it takes you to all sorts of places.
There was a crazy guy on Christopher Street. His name was Bob Goldstein. And Bob Goldstein had this vision. And the vision was that you'd go to his nightclub. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was his environment. And there would be mirrored balls spinning, and there would be lights flashing, and there would be multiple screens with slides on them. And they would play music, and the slides would speak to the music. And Bob was a visionary. And he had a loft, a little tiny loft on Christopher Street, right by the river, just a few blocks from where we're sitting right now. And he began to give these parties, and I came down to help him do the parties. And I brought my friends with me because we were all looking for things to do. And we built a wall where his bedroom was, and we cut holes in it, and we stood on the other side of the wall while people were dancing on the other side. And he had a mirrored ball, and he had Christmas lights that were strung together, and he had dimmers, and he turned them on and off. This is something that if you looked at it now, would look unbelievably cheesy. But in 1966 and 1965, this looked great. And I began to notice that very interesting people were coming to these parties. We were giving 3 parties a weekend. Andy Warhol would come with his entourage. There were movie stars coming to this happening, this scene in Greenwich Village. It's now 1967, the summer of love. And the O'Keefe Center, a theater in Toronto, wants to book a 1-week performance called the San Francisco Scene. And they hire a relatively unknown promoter in San Francisco, a man whose name is Bill Graham. And Bill was to come up and recreate the feelings of San Francisco in this theater. And he was bringing with him the Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead. There was Glenn McKay and his partner Jerry Abrams, and the light show was called Headlights. And they were breaking up, and we didn't know it. And so we were just these friendly guys who just loved everything they did, and Glenn became our friend. Now, again, we're in 1967. Here's this guy who smoked a lot of dope, and he was big and funny, and he had a hair down, you know, big ponytail, and he was the first authentic San Francisco hippie that I ever met, let alone became friends with. And Glenn followed us down to New York City. We built him a light show, and he taught us the techniques and the secrets. Now, we still had to do discos and everything, but all in our heads from Labor Day on in 1967 was light shows. We've got to do light shows. We want to do light shows.
Light shows started at California State University in San Francisco. And the first guy to do liquid lights with light shows was a guy called Elias Samaras. And he was the first one to do the oils in the plates. And I mean, you just had to make it up as you go along. You have to do a lot of things. You know, you have to be a producer, director, designer, you know, a painter, a photographer, and of course no video, because there wasn't any video in those days.
Okay, so this shows the sort of scale of what it looked like. It was, I just happen to like this particular picture because it shows the power. It really did look exactly like that. It was a, you know, that somebody, Terry Reid in this case, would hit this note and this screen would just explode like that. And it was done by somebody just moving plates around with oil and water, so they had the power to do that. I love this, this picture here because it's, what this is we've blended a very primitive video projection into Janis Joplin. So she's actually on the video screen, and we've sort of masked it and moved stuff around it. But as you watch it, you became aware that some of these soft floating lights were in fact her as a video image, and then some of them were things that we were presenting. These are the just common overhead projectors, and with oil and water in them. This is the very basic stuff. It got much bigger and grander, but this was where it began. And the reason we used overhead projectors was just because it was an open working surface. The show was quite vast and was spread out over the whole back. Oh, I'm sorry, these two spread out over the whole back of the of the Fillmore. It was sort of actually literally hung on the wall. When we first started doing light shows, everything was about keyboards. It was about the Thomas Wilford history of the clavilux, which was a keyboard instrument, and that everybody wanted to make keyboards that would turn lights on and off.
My name's George Stadnick, and I'm a Lumia artist. I've been doing this since about 1968, and just recently got involved in digital Lumia, which is definitely the new way to go in Lumia. You basically work with things like lenses, mirrors, shadow elements, color filters, prisms, diffraction gratings, lasers, white lights, or whatever other light sources there are. I mean, these are the materials that you work with. There are several forms of Lumia. One is the pure form, which is what Thomas Wilford practiced, and of his contemporaries, they all did the same thing. Basically, it was the pure image with no sound. And that to me is one of the big distinctions between what's going on now with VJs and multimedia versus what the traditional Lumia is, which is visual, pure visual interpretation of light.
Hi, I'm Bill Etra, and this is the Red Etra video synthesizer. The synthesizer controls the height of an image through zero, the width of an image through zero. The height and width of an image together to 0, which gives us a zoom. The intensity of an image to 0. The horizontal screen position of an image off the screen in both directions. And the vertical position of an image off the screen in both directions. And one other parameter, which we call horizontal centering. As I put an effect into the image, you can see that horizontal centering allows us to move the image through the effect. When we use these controls in combination, we are able to animate the image as we did in the Polyfusion show.
I did that almost a third of a century ago. How's that? That's me demonstrating the retro. And the only reason it was videotaped was I was at a college class and somebody trained a porta-pack on me while I gave the lecture. I had gotten a set of lasers way before I started doing video, and I was doing laser light shows. Was how I started. Then I then as Marsha Rock, she did a documentary called "I Sold My Car to Buy a Porta-Pack." And she got that from me because I sold my car and bought the second porta-pack in New York City.
I was trained to do all kind of real thing, you know, especially art in Europe. And then I abandoned it for a half-inch videotape. And that made my life. I'm sitting here and you're shooting me because of my great meeting with half-inch video, a reel-to-reel. By Sony.
I started after Woody. He was a filmmaker, so it was natural for him to drift into video because he liked multi-screens and all those goodies video can do. And we would first watch feedbacks, but you know, long hours, nights of feedback. And we felt it was like sitting in the fire of at the stove and, you know, and look into the fire. And this was the new modern fire.
This piece that's coming on now, take a look at it, was done before the Red Etra was ever designed. It's called Mars and Optic Aspect. You really have to listen to the sound. It was shown on 9 monitors. It includes the sounds that made it and a background sound of Holt's Mars, Bringer of War. It was done in real time. It includes blowing up the monitor it was done on. And when this is the only light in the room and the sound is pounding you, you have the very nice Mars, Bringer of War, which is very martial. And you got screeches going on. People were sitting on the edge of their seat like this. When things like this were shown, the whole audience was like this. I mean, it was unpleasant to listen to the sounds. It was not meant to be a pleasant thing. I was a young man. I really wanted to, this is the time when I was trying to affect the audience. At one point, I did it with a set of inflatable seating with speakers under the seating. So they were actually feeling the through their asses.
I would go around, I would be like, my God, video. It's like other people say, oh, I'm in love. We would walk around and we would not believe it. We were so high on this stuff. It is just unbelievable.
This was unlike film, you understand? It was not a film. It was different animal whatsoever. No, I was processed through that moment. I could never come back.
I bought a porta-pack, I took it home, I got lost in a feedback loop like everybody else. And I mean, it was a time, there weren't that many porta-packs around New York. I used to fix them for Mike Schamberg and the other video freaks.
Sony delivered this thing to the market thinking of home market. They were not thinking of artists. And of course, I would think 90%, maybe 100% of the people who picked up the first batches were artists. So they immediately wanted something more and something better. And representatives of Sony would always say, we didn't build it for this purpose, like screw you.
We went on a spree around the town. We videotaped everything from rock and roll, jazz. We had Miles, Steiner shot Miles Davis, and I shot, Jimi Hendrix from the balcony in Fillmore. So nobody asked, what the hell? I mean, everybody asked, what the hell is this medium? What's video? I mean, it's video, So they didn't know, so they let you do anything, so you could walk anywhere.
We divided our activities into art, which was for nobody to see, and shooting events, which was very public. Because what was nice was that people would always want to see what we had done, so they would come to our loft and sit there long into the night. But then we realized that what we were doing privately was also of interest to people, oddly enough. So we started looking for spaces to show in. We came up with the idea that we should have a theater, and we found this obsolete old kitchen full of ice boxes, wooden ice boxes, in Soho, and decided to rent it. And everybody told us, don't do it, you're crazy, there is nothing there, there is nobody there. These are just warehouses. It was not called Soho yet, the term had not been invented. And we were on Mercer Street between 3rd and 4th. And everybody was telling us, it is dead zone. You will never, nobody shows up there after 6 o'clock. And we were so lucky actually that we just opened it the week it became busy and became fashionable. I mean, it was just right in there.
The joke I like to make is in the old days, if we got 12 people in, we locked the doors and made them contribute out of embarrassment to get out early.
Our performances were sometimes so bad that everybody in the audience ended up in the bar. So it was a very good thing to have a bar.
The tendency would be people would wander in. Charlie Mingus was playing next door to us half the time. So people would wander in before Charlie went on or after his performance from the bar at the Broadway Central, the Mercer Arts Center, and people would come in, and there were a few audio performances. There were some regular people who were basically futurists or techno freaks who would come by to see what was going on when we were showing computer stuff.
It was often very loud and very gaudy images, and it followed the same rules, like starting very slow and very minimalistic and building it up, and the sound gets louder and so on. And then some protagonists maybe fell from the ceiling and they were naked. And in the 70s, that was a big deal if you were naked. And New York Dolls also came to the kitchen. They started there.
There was still war in Vietnam, so there was a lot of technical, cast off, how do we call these? People that would not join the war, and then we just lived like artists, slept on the floor, smoked the joint.
There were a lot of people coming back from Vietnam, these shattered souls, from the war, and they were skilled and they could not join the industries, they couldn't join anything. And we picked up one of those. He was totally brilliant, and he did modification. His name was George Brown. And he would, we would tell him, like, if he only could do this way, or if he could have a mixer. And he said, I'll build it for you. So it was a box, had inputs and outputs, and slowly we gathered a lot of those boxes. And so we never wanted a synthesizer. We were in touch by that time with Bill.
Remember, we were winging it. Nobody knew electronics. I mean, Steve Rutt knew electronics, but he wasn't doing performances. He was building electronics, and we had to teach ourselves all this stuff.
When we started, there were already a couple of special effects that were called the Vasulka effect. And the first Vasulka effect was to drift the images. And that's why it was nice to have, like in Max's Kansas City, we had 5 monitors in a row, and the image would drift between them. And that happened because of a bad cable. That we had discovered this incredible special effect. And it was called the Vasulka effect.
To do a live show in those days, you needed several hours to prepare, and then you were just lucky if anything went anywhere near the way you thought it was going to go.
The small box you see taped to Louise is a biomedical telemetry transmitter. It is monitoring her heartbeat and sending the signal to the video equipment. The red heart shape is being generated electronically by the video synthesizer and is modulated by Louise's heartbeats. The purpose of the piece is to explore the control of video images by the use of physiological signals. The outcome of the experiment speaks for itself.
There was just no notion of a VJ, because there was not even a notion of a DJ. And going to a bar would have been kind of the last thing to do. And legitimate theaters or spaces wouldn't have us either, because they would say, video, what's that? What's the word? Is it television? No, we don't want any television. So we had to find our own spaces. We collected our own monitors, put them into those big checker cabs, and went to, one was called WBAI, Free Music Store, one was called Judson Church. And to tell you the truth, we actually started our video career in Max's Kansas City Steakhouse. So that's kind of like a bar. They had a bar upstairs, and the guy let us use it. And so that was our first show. So maybe we were VJs and DJs from the beginning.
A VJ is someone who edits video live.
Working with pre-recorded chunks and then working with the transitions in between those things, kind of the way a DJ would do a night composed of songs.
If you think about what a DJ does, you know, he takes his mixer, he takes his records, his media. Think about a VJ, well, you know, we've got our mixer, we've got our media, so it's a relative term.
Definition of VJ: cute and happy and colorful.
I loathe the term VJ. I absolutely can't stand it. I think that it greatly diminishes what we do.
It's really about somebody who's taking the images, processing them, and bringing you on a journey with the images.
Me, I'm a visualist.
Performance artist doesn't say enough. Editor doesn't say enough.
Well, first of all, I'm not crazy about the term VJ.
Someone who is doing live video in a way that is musical rather than designing or editing. So that means treating it like an instrument.
I like that term, vision mixer.
Someone who performs visuals.
That word VJ is a misnomer.
VJing is a little bit of a difficult term for me.
I'm not that comfortable with it yet.
So I think vision mixing is a much more appropriate term, and it's self-explanatory.
I still fight. I still fight to be called to be called a visualist and not a VJ.
Visualist, I think.
You know, the truth is, I hate that term VJ. VJ sucks. Can I just say that? VJ sucks.
I do remember a time, though, where I couldn't really think of more than 5 people in this town, New York City of all places, that actually had a video projector and would, at the moment's notice, run out to some place and set it up and start throwing pictures around. I mean, granted, sure, there were more than 5 people, but not doing it in any way more applied. Like we were, who's we? I don't even remember now. I suppose there's a lot more people doing that now. I don't know who they are necessarily. I do know that I see the word VJ all the time now, and I do know that there's always a visualist, but I don't never notice their work necessarily, unless I get struck over the head by it, or, well, who am I kidding? I never go out anyway, so as far as I know, there's lots of people in a scene or something.
I think the VJ scene in New York, it became more saturated, meaning everybody doing, your cousin doing VJ, or your sister doing VJ, something like that. But I think it's important to be unique, exclusive. What do you do if you're a VJ? So I'll just stick with what I like and then just go for it. And I don't really look at people's work all the time. I'd rather, concentrate on my work.
I think everyone was probably doing this at the same time. It's just no one was aware. We haven't really been aware of each other. We're all kind of in our own bubbles. For example, the bubble that I got into was Share, and Share was just kind of a place where you could go and show up, and it was it was kind of a part social scene, part kind of like free jam, part place to see, sample and see software, and that's really where I came out of. And to me, for a while, the only people that I knew who were VJs were the people who were there.
Well, first of all, I think that most video artists are dangerous loners who spend most of their time alone looking at computer screens. So a lot of people, it's probably as friendly as you can be with them is to talk video with them, because otherwise they probably don't have a lot to say, or maybe they do, but I can spend 3 months, I could spend 3 months in front of my computer. If someone would, bring me money to pay the takeout guy, I could stay here for the rest of my life. So, and I think that's true of a lot of video artists. I don't think that, I think that a lot of people's friendliness and sociability and stuff is on the screen. And then you go right to talk to them, they're either closed-mouthed or, you guys aren't on the same wavelength, and it's usually the video that communicates. That's our commonality, is that we're all attracted to that rectangle on the wall that's shining.
I don't get out very much. So I have no idea what the state was when I first got started. But I think it's pretty cool right now. There's all sorts of events going on all the time, even here in Troy, and I go down to New York and it's always some sort of video event going on. So it's definitely blossoming.
We're such a niche group within the artistic community even, that I feel like there's a strong affinity between visual artists, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing it, you're doing it, somehow or another we're connected, whatever that connection means.
When I started doing live video shows, we used to rent trucks to bring all the equipment to do the show. I mean, now people show up with their laptops and they're like, plug it in, and that's pretty great. I mean, I wish I could work just with a laptop.
When you think about how expensive and inaccessible the equipment was, we really had to master tech production like nobody's business. I mean, so when we come in and do the gig, half the show was just carrying our stuff from point A to point B and rigging it. Rigging. We had to do everything from, you know, the electrical wires to hanging, climbing on the ladders, you know. That was a really huge part of what kept us going and what enabled us to do what we're doing. Now people take it for granted. They could come in, they could show up with their media, plug right in. That is such a luxury.
We would go to a show with like 100 VHS tapes that we had made that would just be loops, you know, like 10-second loops, 30-second loops. So the whole tape would just be nothing but one 30-second loop, you know, and so that's why we had to carry hundreds of tapes with us. And we would show up with just this giant rack full of tapes and sort through them and just keep mixing them all night and mixing them with live camera and bringing. We would sometimes bring a lot of props and other kind of things to build environments on the fly and shoot that live and mix it with our tapes. And so that was kind of a very, very primitive early version of VJing. Now that could all be done on a laptop.
It used to be a lot bigger deal, but we used to live in a party town too, where there was a rave every week within 25 miles of New York, and now we don't. You know, since we went through the whole Giuliani time till now, all those venues have dried up to us, where we used to do so much underground stuff, and you just can't anymore. You can't smoke cigarettes anymore. It's like we live in a whole different world. You know, the parties now are in Omaha. They're not here.
No, it's what it is. It's like when you go to a space, right, and it's a nice space, someone actually put some money down, and they have a DJ and a booth, and everything's all proper and arranged, and they put your visual setup on a card table on the floor, essentially. You're just sitting at a table in the middle of a dance floor, more or less, and you got all this equipment now. I mean, this is years later, so I actually invested a little, and I can't get up to pee because the homeboy shopping network's in effect. You got guys just like sizing up your gear up and down. You know, if you didn't have a friend with you or whatever, you're in a pretty weird position. So more often than not, I would set up at the early part of the party. I'd put up the screens on the wall if there needed to be any, hang up the projector and whatnot. You know, lug out my cat box full of VHS decks, because that's all I had at the time. They weigh a ton, and I have like 4 or 5 of them with me. And set it all up and then start going. As soon as the music started, I'd put my head down and I'd start switching, and scratching and switching. I don't know anyone else at the time who did it, or even maybe still do it still, but you do that analog, kind of equivalent to, you know, like a turntablist thing, but with video. You know, scratching on the beat, cutting and scratch on the break, and dropping pause on the pause. Anyways, but no, to make a long story short though, the typical thing would be me there all night until I would wear a notch into my fingernail because the knob on the crossfader had broken off, and I was just holding the little hard piece of metal, and I would actually, after about 6 hours, just groove that right into my finger and be on that beat for like the whole evening. I did that for quite a while until I got really bored of being there all night. And then, you know, it played its course. I had a great time sometimes, but towards the end I started thinking, I worked about 6 times longer than anyone else here, and I got cab fare. That sucked. So I got tired of that crap, especially when a guy would come by and play a bunch of records in a row and, you know, make bank. So that just kind of got a little tiresome.
Doing a gig for us now is more of a matter of either carrying our little gear over our shoulders in a bag, just like you guys sort of came, or calling up some huge company and saying, we need 14 plasma screens, they need to be in this position, and start faxing people stuff. And those are the fun ones now, where you can just send the floor plot to people and say, this is what we need, but that's what it's evolved into.
So a typical gig usually works like this. I get all of my shit together probably an hour before I actually have to leave my apartment. I think about whether or not I'm going to want to incorporate live work. I think about how much space I'm going to be able to have to set up. I think about who else is going to be there and whether or not I want to keep my options open.
All I do really is I just put a bunch of junk in my bag and get on the subway.
You load up a bunch of cable, a projector or 2 or 3, all of your gear, your VJ rig.
First, you start out at home getting together equipment. The big question for most gigs is whether or not there's a projector available.
I almost never have so much equipment that I can't take the subway to a gig.
I could get the whole thing, going in a backpack. That's always been a good thing. I've had pretty killer rigs that fit and carry on. I still do. Now I'm into rifle cases.
So I just plug in and start, because chances are there was a VJ before me.
If I'm taking any live feeds, if I'm getting any interaction from the performers, we'll get that tested and set up.
If the club can't get the projector working, that's like really their problem, not mine. So I'm not gonna get there 6 hours early and make sure the projector is working. That's their problem.
The software can go to sleep and just put out a black screen until we're ready to come on stage.
Of course, you've already done all your pre-production, so all of your video is prepped, you have ideas, you've rehearsed, you know some of the elements you want to put together.
No matter what, you gotta meditate on your show, think about what you want to create, what you want to be playing with, how that's going to happen. You pack up your gear, you go to the space, you set it up, try and take some time, clear your head, and find a way to really get into the vibe and enjoy the mixing.
Yeah, I just kind of show up. I don't know.
We are totally old school, hardware, analog based. I don't even have a laptop when I perform, and people they're like, how does she do that with DVD players and tapes, And I use mixers to make effects live, and I think, it's a big thing. Different. It looks a lot different.
I don't use the computer at all for my live sets. I use DVDs, but I create everything on the computer.
Okay, G4 laptop, running my software, that's it.
I did perform live with an Altair, and it had 256 bytes, not kilobytes, bytes of memory, and you had to program it in octal, in base 8 numbers on the front panel switches.
In my opinion, the computer's always the weakest part of the system.
I don't use laptops. I always said I'd never use a laptop live, and I broke my own rule just less than a week ago. I was being lazy. I sat down, I flew all the way to Florida. I had a 15-minute set. It consisted of nothing but me going, why does this not work now? It worked 15 minutes ago, it'll work in 15 minutes. I'll never use a laptop.
What's going on right now is my computer's rebooting because I crashed.
People think technology, wow, it's going to change everything. Technology is great. We want more technology. And the fact of the matter is that every tool that you get creates as many problems as it solves, and I think it's good for people to be kind of not so optimistic about technology. You should be a little bit kind of skeptical or pessimistic, and you'll have a healthy relation with technology.
Laptops aren't meant to be performed on, they're meant so you can, work on your spreadsheet on the airplane.
We've seen a lot of, go ahead and say it, a lot of laptop artists where the whole point is the laptop. It's not the art, it's not the audience, it's not making a statement. It's about you're doing something cool with a tool. And we would never...
I mean, which is fine, if you have your tool.
But it's sort of a different thing. It's like geek appeal. It's not really art. I'm sorry to say, it is.
since there is so much choice in your software of live VJing, I think it's become really slick in the aesthetic. A little too slick. It's a little bit like CD quality being a little too sharp. And there's something about that where you want to feel something more organic. You want to feel somebody's hand.
Good video, bad video, it's just like anything else. You know it when you see it. And then to some extent, if it looks good, it is good.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you use to create it, as long as it looks good. I feel very strongly about that.
The tools are a great inspiration, and it is true they take over, and when they take over and the work is therefore too tool-oriented, you just don't release it. That's all there is to it.
That act of programming is the real new artistic medium of the 21st century. And certainly, I mean, certainly in the 20th century as well, but I think it's the real new addition, software as artwork, programming as artistic practice. I think for me, video is much less the issue than I am building the tools with which I am making my work.
For the software side of it, I use Max, and I use this thing called Jitter, which are a bunch of video extensions to Max that I helped write. The nice thing about the software that I use, the Max software, is it's reasonably open-ended. It's actually incredibly open-ended, so you can build your own instrument.
The real constraint of what VJs and live video artists have to work with today, for me, it really comes down to the interface. Like the piano, the guitar, the pipe organ, there's nothing like that in video. The big problem with computers is really the physical interface above all. It doesn't have enough knobs and buttons.
You know, I want to turn a knob and have something happen.
I have to say I'm in sort of the knob twiddling phase.
I enjoy twiddling knobs.
Knob twirling is cool.
You know, often you're doing no more than like turning a little knob.
If I give you a knob, a 10-turn knob, you have to turn 10 times to go from one end to the other.
What am I going to twiddle knobs along the way?
Maybe some knobs.
Knobs and buttons.
So I'm a knob twiddler. Definitely.
And we had a knob.
Yeah.
We have all the knobs that you can. I'm a knob fanatic and collector, so I have to have as many. I mean, if I had a knob and a fader and a switch for everything.
I think you'll see more and more knob twiddlers.
The knobs, that was half of our discussions always with Rat and Etra, was about the knobs.
The important thing is the knob and the ability to turn it.
So it used to be that the big problem with live video, the health hazard, I felt was just the lugging of the gear. And now it shouldn't be a problem, but because I'm never happy with just a computer, it's still a problem for me. My back is all screwed up. Let this be a warning. Live video can be hazardous to your health.
You get carpal tunnel and bad posture, and your eyes hurt from staring at a computer screen for too long.
You're in a nightclub environment with drunk people, with people on drugs, with people who are not in control of themselves. And so, yes, there are hazards, especially as a woman, there are hazards and annoyances. And as a technician, as an artist, I don't feel like I should have to put up with that kind of crap, and I don't. You know, if some guy tries to grope me in a nightclub, I have him arrested. It's as simple as that. I'm not there for that purpose. I'm not there for his entertainment, his physical entertainment. I'm there to provide a service for the entire crowd.
When you perform in clubs, there are drunk assholes. It's the nature of the beast. When you perform at parties, there are drunk assholes, and you have to do your very best to make sure that everything's backed up before you go to a club, and that everything is careful in case your laptop, someone dumps a beer into it, which I've seen it happen. You have to be prepared for that.
Job-related hazards, as in what, you become like a total vidiot? You get vidiot retardation, I don't know, like
a lot of the VJs.
Bad art.
We had a ceiling tile come down the other week from snow melting over the building.
Shit gets fucked up all of the time. On Friday night at Subtonic, I melted my tripod because someone had moved it under a flame.
Well, I had somebody fall on top of me once at Limelight.
Being on a ladder that's really rickety, really, really high up when you shouldn't be.
Carpal tunnel syndrome and like bad posture.
Job-related hazards, besides the, I guess the potential self-inflicted psychic death syndrome.
The only hazard that you have when especially when you're working in a club environment, is drunk girls in stilettos with glasses of wine near your equipment.
You have all this expensive equipment and people are talking to you and they're drinking and you're getting nervous and you know, you sit on your little monitor, it's just like, get out. You get really tense.
Imbeciles with flamethrowers that think that's really funny to shoot them at people and things like that, which has happened. When you're inside of a big plastic bubble made out of like regular polyester plastic, whatever they make shopping bags out of, inside of that and some other genius has a propane tank and he's shooting flaming liquid around really close to you being surrounded by this stuff that's gonna meld with your skin.
There was this one time we were doing a gig. It was like an illegal gig in the middle of the desert somewhere in Israel, and when we got there everything seemed okay, but at some point there were a lot of drugs involved, and we started to see people running around naked.
You have to be careful about your equipment. You're in clubs with people who are frequently inebriated, and they're clumsy, and they're holding large beverages. I've been playing and had people frequently throw their gear back. I've seen those things explode into flame because someone threw their stuff on top of a candle. I frequently play with my computer on a cooling rack, like an oven cooling rack, so that if a drink spills or something spills, even on the table, at least everything's above the surface of the table.
So the way I'm probably going to set this up is I'm going to split my signal, and one's going to go to that screen, and one's going to be showing up on the ceiling.
I'm expecting music and visuals that kind of pertain what's going on with the music, and just light dancing to sound.
I have seen still light shows where light was the most important thing in the gallery, and it helped, but I don't know if a VJ sort of light show would be the same thing.
For me, it's a political thing as well, and it goes beyond just being a sort of thing about music and video. It's a kind of political movement. Socially it can change things, and I believe that.
I think it's at a point now where the audience is getting more sophisticated, and as they see more visuals, they're going to be able to tell the difference between just wallpaper and ambient video that's just going along with the flow, and video that's really being mixed on point and on beat.
The majority of the entire festival was done planning over internet, and then the majority of planning worldwide was done over the internet. So during the festivals, no one had ever met anyone face to face before.
What we're doing really is a unique form of performance, and it's integrating technology with art and with performance like nobody's ever done before.
I think the biggest critique of electronic music for a long time is it didn't have this performance element to it. It was you know, some guy standing behind a laptop or turntables or something, and the VJ thing kind of came along and it kind of like satisfied that need for a visual element to electronic music. So I think it's kind of a natural evolution or kind of an outgrowth of electronic music. You know, I think the two work very well together.
This art form's pretty much come out of club culture, you know, just because clubs are a great place to experiment. You know, they're free of a lot of dogma that exists in kind of art galleries and kind of other areas for creativity.
One of the main reasons I feel that VJing has started to come really into the mainstream was because it was kind of forced out. As soon as the rave parties ended and across the United States, the main #1 venue for VJs to perform at disappeared, and so they started moving into clubs. And as soon as the clubs became corporate and the VJs were locked out of there, we had to look to other alternatives.
Galleries,
fashion shows,
theaters now, like we did
basically
this year.
anything that we can do to continue to perform and be artists.
I think as the idea of it gains more steam here in the U.S., you know, it's a matter of time, I think, before someone like Linkin Park or someone like that picks up a visual artist and adds that to their set, and all of a sudden, you know, 5 years from now on TRL, there's, you know, so-and-so VJ doing their thing against, you know, a musical backdrop. I think that's definitely coming.
In VJing, it's a very interesting scene, you know, there's all this cutting edge stuff going on, but there are no heroes. There are no superheroes, there are no names that are known on the street, and I think that's quite justified at the moment because our art form in terms of an entertainment form of its own has not reached a level of maturity or is able to kind of to hold an audience in so many ways.
There's a lot of different VJs. You'll get a lot of different interviews. A lot like narrative, a lot like different styles. We all think each other's is not what we're wanting to do because we have our own idea. So
it's cool though. It's like this big collective externalized hallucination.
Motion Dive is the, I think, first software that you can perform the visuals by computer, and there's a and B, and then if you put the movie clips A and B and then change it like this, so it's synchronized with the music completely, and then also there's a text layer, and then you can show the text out of way like this. So if the DJ wants put their names on the screen, you can show their DJ name like this. So it's pretty good software. And then if you tap like here 4 times, this function counts the BPM and it synchronizes the music totally. Almost DJ software is just playing visuals. Well, like this software, you can install your own movie clips and play. So like this software, with this software, like VJ can be an artist. You know what I mean? Not just a lighting guy.
The EJ turntable is the world's first MIDI turntable. It uses this patent-pending optical vinyl, so it's a standard 12-inch vinyl that that you put on your record player. But instead of an audio groove, it's totally smooth. And instead of music on it, there's just this black and white pattern. So all that's on this record is just this black and white pattern. There's no video on the record. Then instead of a needle that normally goes in the groove, there's an optical cartridge, which is kind of like a laser that just reads this record. So there's a pair of light sensors here in the cartridge, and that comes out to a piece of hardware, the MIDI converter, that sends MIDI information and lets you hook it into your computer. So you have an optical turntable that will let you scratch video. So when I say scratch, I mean like the same way a DJ mixes. You can slow down, you can speed up, you can stop. Like you can see now that the turntable stopped and the video stopped. Whereas if I start the turntable, the audio and video starts back up.
Well, this is the V4 video mixer. It's a 4-channel video mixer. So you have your inputs 1 through 4. You have S-video on the back as well. And it has a number of effects that you can apply to each side of the bus. You can see I can just switch from one source to the next. In addition to just transition effects, you have a number of composite effects that you can use as well. It's become the standard video mixer for the VJ. Edirol is a Japanese company. We're a member of the Roland Group. So Mr. Kekaheshi founded Edirol as kind of the computer audio and the video arm of Roland, because video is really his passion. And he's had this saying for a really long time that he wants to democratize media creation. He wants to bring it to the people where the passion is, maybe not necessarily the money.
Because we can't get paid like Nicky Mesta said.
Right.
We can't get paid $50 to do a club gig versus
I
some
give
guy's
most of my
iTunes.
gigs outside of the state I live in, so
yeah,
you know.
or outside the U.S. for that
And
matter.
even outside the U.S., yeah.
In club scene, promoter doesn't have money to pay for the visuals, so VJ should be grown up from the club scene to the other commercial stuff, like the visual for the singer or car show. You can use visuals for a lot of things, not just the club scene. So that's the next level, I think.
And you can have thousands of clips to work with, and then you can crossfade between your traditionally through your A and B channel. Change clips on your B channel, flip over back to A, and crossfade between them. And these buttons control how when you do a change over here or a change of an effect, it determines what channel it goes to.
In the last 5 years, there's been like a real explosion of this sort of work actually having a home and having somewhere to be shown, because before that there really wasn't anything for it. You know, it was either your work fell into this category of being, you know, video art and you were a fine artist, and it was pretty much like all about this sort of individual kind of creativity. You know, I am X and I show my work to Y people in a gallery context. Or you were kind of something else. You're like a promo director or you're a commercial director. There was no kind of home for this sort of hybrid of creativity.
Within the field of what we're calling VJing, there's likely to be work that is art and work that isn't. So there's nothing about the fact that something is performed by a VJ that then means that it's either art or not art. Some of it will be, and some of it, perhaps most of it, won't.
There'll always be crap. There'll always be things that are not really worth looking at, and that will be sort of ill-fated, or boring experiments. And then there will always be really outstanding work produced in any format. And I think that to be able to pick those works and insert them within the larger continuum of art history is relevant. I think that every form has its, it's sort of more popular, more easy, accessible type of cultural production, and then more experimental, more bold, more daring, and so on.
We had a performance at the museum about a year and a half ago that was done by Johnny DeCam and Benton Bainbridge, and it was quite wonderful in how the people who thought they didn't like this sort of thing found themselves to be drawn in. They wouldn't have gone to a club. The performers themselves modify their performance based on their surroundings, so they presented something that was perhaps more museum-friendly and general audience-friendly. In turn, though, I believe that the audience also modified their perception of this. People kept asking, what is it that we're looking at right now? This is really interesting. What is it? And so for me, that's very exciting.
I'll make entertaining pieces that I call entertainment, and it has that purpose. But then there are these other pieces that have another purpose, that are supposed to touch you, and maybe even touch you profoundly. I don't know if I ever have, but that's a dream, to touch somebody profoundly. That's the art. But some people stay completely just in one field or another. They are only artists, and their only drive is to do these very serious things. And then if you are a DJ, your prime is to entertain. So that's how I would define it. But then there are a lot of people who go between the two. It's natural, I think.
If I'm in an art gallery, I'm a video artist. If I'm in a club, I'm a VJ.
The setting, the context is always going to create a certain kind of dynamics of something. I mean, again, if you use the sense of concert in a club, and bring really outstanding club visuals, people are going to relate to them in a very different way.
I think it's always important to, for as an artist, to be able to perform on all different levels, to go into the garage, to go into the party scene, to go into the gallery, because it's all about being in the public, and you have a different audience who's going to look at your work in a different way, and that's exciting.
There's a problem that sometimes the art world has with work that's entertaining, and also work that's experienced in social context, perhaps, and not in the staid, drab gallery environment.
If you think you're making art, and don't confuse it with the work in the club, because the work in the club is something else. And the club is a club. It's not there to show your art. And if it was there to show your art, then it would be a gallery and not a club. And there is nothing to prevent you from having both careers.
I feel really fortunate because I come from an art background, but I can go into the VJ scene, whereas I don't think the VJ scene would go so much into the art scene. I can understand why, but you don't see too much of that happening.
They're fundamentally different, but the difference is context, and often the same material can be perceived entirely differently depending on the setting.
The difference between a concert and a nightclub is that the nightclub is not about the performer on the stage. It's actually about the people on the dance floor relating to each other. And in that sense, it's a much more interactive thing. And so if the video becomes too much of a focus of attention, it really takes away the people's ability to really express themselves or to interact with each other, and they all basically become like zombies in front of a screen.
The downside of club work is your work is always meant to be a background. It's never people there, like they're not there to specifically see your stuff. So I think there's definitely benefits to galleries.
I don't know in terms of the people partying and drinking and dancing, how much they're really consciously involved with like the visuals.
The big club scene is, to me, it's just so creepy. This is something that's supposed to be about fun, and it never is. It never is. It's always about whether or not people are going to get the money, who's going to get the drugs, who's going to get fucked. You know, it's so much of it is about that, and I really just wanted to have a good time.
Club space is really actually a very inhospitable environment for video art because the people who are in a club are interested in dancing, they're interested in drinking, they're interested in reproducing, but they're not interested in focusing on art. So just because of the environment of a club, any video that gets projected turns into wallpaper, no matter how good or bad it is. And there's nothing wrong with making wallpaper. I mean, if people didn't make wallpaper, then, well, I don't know what would happen. But I just think that if you're really, really serious about what you're doing, you have higher aspirations, and you want people to get more from what you're working on. I also am really, really interested in time and the ways that we perceive time, the ways we think about time. And the work I'm doing now is really about transforming time, taking things that take place at different moments and condensing them or concatenating them into a different time space.
I sort of find the art world to be to reward people for doing things that are more original and maybe aren't they're not so caught up in things like polish. But I feel the club world is more interested in polish, and what will be considered acceptable is more narrow. So I don't think it's necessarily the same art, different venues. You know, certainly for myself, I feel that certain things are appropriate for one venue, but not so appropriate for the other.
You know, there's a much more critical eye once you're in the museum. They're looking at your work as what you have to say as an artist, not just the process, not just the tools. The main thing is, what do you have to say as an artist?
All the kind of fringe performance, you know, art areas are places where people can work through ideas quickly and test ideas out, and they can kind of move fast and travel light. And I think this space is one of the most interesting or innovative at this point.
But in terms of like being taken seriously by the art world, you couldn't pose as a VJ and try to get a gig at the Whitney Museum. It wouldn't fly. And so when we would do VJ gigs, like for Pseudo or at different clubs like Knitting Factory, whatever, we would call ourselves, we decided we would change our name to Emanation Red. Of course, it didn't work for too long because everybody knew us as the pool, because it was the same people that were jamming.
The space is more gratifying somehow. Yeah, I think that there is more prestige that comes out of it. Also that you can create work and then the work stays there. It's not, it doesn't disperse after you've left for the night. And that's another thing, is that for nightclub work, it generally only happens when you're there making it happen. Whereas for the gallery work, you know, you can leave and it can still continue to happen for the duration of the show.
Where is like high art going, I have no idea, because there were those few high artists like Bill Viola and Nam June, and I guess Bruce Nauman, maybe Gary Hill, I don't know. And I don't know where they are going. They seem to be in good hands, especially Bill. He just keeps doing his thing, and he gets well paid. And there are, you know, Barney, Matthew Barney. I mean, there are a lot of them. That scene seems to be taking care of itself, and it is in museums, and I have no opinions on that. I even partially belong to it myself, but it is not very interesting to. It's much more interesting to get a big hangar to put your stuff in, or some basements or some weird stuff.
A dirty underground basement warehouse with like low ceilings and just like, you know, nice and dirty and sweaty and nasty, and it can be a lot of fun.
Back in Israel, it was much more commercial gig, which was involving sometimes driving for 2 or 3 hours to all kind of weird places in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the night, just to go to all kind of like big raves. Most of them illegal. Like by the time the police is coming, then we have to pack and leave.
I love those kinds of parties. Get a raw space, invite as many people as you can think of to come down, do what they want to do, and then just see what happens. Those are my favorite shows.
I had somebody say to me, it was another woman who was a video artist, and she said to me that that she didn't do the kind of live video work that I do, that she did more art. And I thought that was kind of a little bit cheeky.
Hard, fast, arts and crafts. Hard, fast, arts and crafts. Hard, fast, arts and crafts. Hard, fast, arts and crafts.
VJs have not yet gotten the level of respect that they will get at some point. You know, we're just becoming like recognized as a draw on flyers right now, for example.
The biggest challenge that the art world faces with these new forms is how to show them and then how to sell them. And it boils down to that. I mean, there's a lot of things that never made their way or took a really long time to make their way to the museum because nobody really knew how to deal with them. I mean, video, if you think about it, you know, it took for like, I'd say about 25 to 30 years for people to really acknowledge the importance of video in the field of art. But that's because it's become a commodity.
For those who are interested in acquiring art, this form presents tremendous challenges. But it's no different than traditional performance in that way. It is ephemeral. But I think there is a potential, because what this work does is it kind of calls into question the division or the difference we perceive between recorded and performed work, because it is in a way a combination. That there may still be sellable, distributable, mass-producible cultural artifacts that can be the result of these activities.
Computers are the folk art of the new millennium.
If you want to be an artist, make art. And nobody can tell you what is and what isn't art. But if you have to be an artist and also make your living as a bartender, there's nothing wrong with that. And if you want to be an artist and make your living doing VJ work, there's nothing wrong with that either. You know, I think I just don't see a place for light artists to be really big, and here's why. And when I say big, I don't mean they can be great. I just mean rock stars. Because if what you're doing is the manipulation of light and imagery, then the audience has to see it somewhere. And they're going to see it on some kind of a screen. Now, do they look at the screen or do they look at you? Do you stand in front of the screen and wave your arms around? Are you the Wizard of Oz? What exactly do you do? I personally can't think of anything. It's a good idea. I'd like to think about it, but I don't know a way that you turn into a rock star without distracting from the very thing that you're doing.
I think that eventually you're going to have a star emerge. I think the way you have DJ stars emerge that maybe the whole world doesn't know about, but club people know about, I think that's going to happen, if it hasn't already happened.
Well, isn't a rock star the same, I mean, as an art star?
See, I'd like to VJ all those signs in Times Square. I'd like to have my stuff going. I'd like to be standing in the middle of it and just, you know, with my camera in my hand going, "Hey buddy, look." You know, I mean, I would like to just, to me that's the dream gig, is just to get all those screens, just that they're yours for 5 minutes.
I want to project on the dark side of the moon. It's my goal. It's my goal. Someday.
Maybe because I'm from Japan, maybe one day I wanted to project my work onto Mount Fuji.
I've met interesting people through it. I don't know, maybe my girlfriend, one of the things that attracted her to me at first was that I was a video artist. I don't know. I never asked. I don't know. Does being a rock star affect you? Am I a rock star yet?
But I know this polecat named Fiesel. Fiesel, she a mighty weasel. She is big and she is strong. She is nearly 2 feet long. She is brave and she is bold. She is no one knows how old. A fuzzy wuzzy polar bear. Fiesel, she has lots of hair. Furry arms and furry thighs. Has red rubies, place of eyes. Now Fiesel, she's a fearsome grin, long fangs hang down, neath furry chin, but beneath that toothy smile lies a polecat with real style. So clap your paws and stamp your feet. Fiesel, she is really neat. Give a shout and give a cheer, and we'll summon that mighty weasel here. Now when you rub on Fiesel's belly, Fiesel, she'll start to shake like jelly. When she hears the music beat, that polecat gets up on her feet. That weasel does not know the dance, but that ferret sure does love to prance.